Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of India IT 360 Presents the Tech Tea Podcast. And I'm your host for today, Survi Sahay, Senior Content Writer. And to take our podcast series forward, I take the pleasure to introduce a very special guest today, Mr. G. Andrew Winston, a technology leader and advisor with 38 years of experience in IT, having over 25 years of experience in leadership roles. He specializes in cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity and data, and AI across platforms like AWS, Azure, IBM, and Google Cloud. He has worked in HCL for 20 years. He spent 14 years in Intellect as SVP, Head of Global Technology and Services, and CEO, leading large scale cloud and IT information for global banks across APAC, the US, Europe, and beyond. Today, he advises organizations like Tunga Aerospace and Koreatic on cloud, cybersecurity, and building future ready tech capabilities. Previously, worked as the SVP and CIO at Intellect Design Arena Limited. So, hello and welcome to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Really excited to join in this program on cloud and cybersecurity program through India IT 360.
It's pleasure having you, sir, on our Tech Tea podcast. So, moving on, here is my first question to you. You have spent decades in IT infrastructure leadership. So, how would you describe your journey and its evolution over the years?
See, if you look way back in mid 1980, that's 1987, when I started my journey, at that time, there's no name called IT. That's the time it was a computer era that, people build the application in the computer and store in a floppy and send it across to the headquarters through courier. And that's how the data transfer happened. And way back in 1990 to 2000, India was establishing network across the country through VSAT or dial-up or maybe a lease line or INET program through which that they do a data transfer. So there's a big, you know, the network evolution happened between 2000, 1990 to 2000. And 2000 to 2010, if you are looking into that, that's the time IT management started. How to manage the IT in a very structured way. IT outsourcing from global to India, that started at that point of time. So the program started IT management through ITIL, you know, the structured way of managing the IT infrastructure started. And partly that if you look into the 2000 to 2015, the enterprise started building their IT infrastructure. You know, they buy the network, they buy the MPLS kind of network, and they build their data center and host the server. And virtualization got evolved at that point of time. So it's building the infrastructure with the virtualization and hosting the application, monolithic application like that, the WebLogic, WebSphere, and Oracle database or DB2, IBM application they started installing at that point of time. And 2015 is the time where the cloud journey started. That, cloud, it's a public cloud, private cloud, and some of the cloud providers in India, I should name, especially like ESDS, the controllers, entity, L&T, these are the organizations started providing the cloud similar way like AWS or Google or Azure. And now currently, if you look into that, the IT infrastructure is very complex. Everyone got a traditional enterprise IT because you can't push back all your application out of the organization. You need to maintain them. And same point of time, there is a public cloud for ramping up some of the critical applications. in large scale applications, and private cloud for test and development, plus some of the application, on a private cloud. And SASE started evolving at that point of time because the security is more important. So SASE is another pillar. And, if you look into that, all work on Zoom or maybe at Office 365 or Google Workspace or Zoho Workspace. So where these are on a SaaS platform. So we have a five pillars, as I mentioned. That's what we reached at this particular stage. It's very complex, and how one effectively manages efficiently, that's more important here.
Okay, so as you told about moving from traditional data centers to cloud first environment. So, how has the definition of the core IT infrastructure changed in this from the movement from traditional data to a cloud first environment? How would you define this?
Actually, if you look into the traditional data center where we host that application, virtualization, on top of that, you host the monolithic application. If you look into the architecture wise, let me go each one on that where the data center and the cloud first journey that, where it differs. We started with the monolithic application. Now we reach to the microservices and container application. So earlier we struggled to do that, the deployment in automated way. Everyone could achieve semi-automated way. Now, everyone could automate and deploy the application very fast as the number of application increases, and the changes also it's coming very rapidly for each of the organization. So it's becoming a static to a dynamic situation where we reached as a architectural shift. And if you look into the technology evaluation, you know where service were there, now it's a container and Docker. And virtualization, if you look into that, the container application and in the public cloud, there's a AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, and Elastic Kubernetes Service by, the Azure and AWS. So these are on a public cloud. But the same if someone want to create a monolithic on a private cloud, where they stand. So equally that the technology evolved in terms of the hyperconverged infrastructure. That's the one on which Nutanix or maybe that the OpenShift kind of application, which it's equivalent to that AKS, EKS of Azure and AWS. So that's a shift. It happened in terms of the technology front here. And the challenge you look into that, the the more you move to the public cloud or the other, you have to effectively manage the cost management. So FinOps becoming a very critical factor here for managing the cost effectively here. Also, you lock to the particular vendor at any point of time. So if you lock to a particular vendor for a quite long time, maybe that what happened to the other regions or your business expansion, how you want to make that, that's a challenge for some of the organization. And more and above the security responsibility that because when you have a data center, it's totally secured, you have a total control of network security, every component. Whereas when you go to the cloud first, you have to have a shared responsibility. What is taken care by the clouds, cloud provider, and what responsibility customer takes. There should be a clear definition, clear way, so that the security is taken care. So I put it this particular way to summarize: data center, the owning and managing the infrastructure is owned by the customer, whereas the cloud first, that it's a you will be consuming the infrastructure as service, like infrastructure as service or platform as service or software as service. So that's a shift. It happened during this, data center to the cloud first journey.
Okay, so taking more on this, like you talked about the interest architecture. So as a CIO, how do you decide between private cloud and public cloud strategies? What is your take?
See, everyone started with the public cloud model when virtualization started, but it couldn't rapidly, expand. The capacity became more constrained. That forces many of the organization enterprises to shift to a public cloud. So public cloud, where you want to build an infrastructure, it's very rapid. You open an account, you immediately create an infrastructure and start building your application. You can do in no time you could achieve that. That's advantage one they got in the public cloud. But as the public cloud started expanding, there are other challenges in terms of, is the public cloud available in all regions, you know whether it's available. So also the cost factor, as I mentioned, that because the previous question that while answering I was mentioning about the cost management. The cost management comes, very critical here while managing the public cloud. So again, that the organization started moving back, not completely into that. They have a part of the infrastructure moved to the private cloud. So that way that cost become more effective for them. To summarize here that because you have a private cloud where you have a strict compliance and you have a full control of security and cost management. But when you move to a public cloud, it's scalable and global reach. Because you want to create an environment in Canada or maybe US and some places, you can immediately open the account and start using it here. So, and at current stage that it becoming more of a hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, because again the private cloud pull is started. Many organizations started moving from public cloud back into the private cloud, but they can move completely. Partially they move applications into the private cloud. So that's where we stand today.
So, is there a misconception in organization as well regarding this cloud transformation? The biggest misconception that you can say that the organizations are having at this present time, talking about when we talk about the cloud, the enterprise. So, tell me about that.
See, the moment everyone started about a cloud, that you can imagine the blind man touch the elephant and say what exactly they say about it, right? A little bit of that. It started, but now everyone understand the cloud better and better because it's a quite long journey on the cloud for many of the organization. So one of the critical factors is that the cloud always cheaper. You start, you'll be cheaper. Okay, you have to get the hardware, you have to get the security all together. You need to have a manpower to build your private cloud. So that way that cloud becoming cheaper, that's the concept it came. But when you actually put across the pen and paper and your cost management, the private cloud hyper-converged infrastructure on which you build the cloud, which is much cheaper than the actual cloud. So it's a question of capex versus opex. That's the one. The second factor is that the cloud is fully secured. You have account Google, you have a AWS account, Google account, or maybe Microsoft account. Everyone started opening the account and start creating the infrastructure. The question is, are you secured? That's a very, very important thing. So assumption on that fully secured, it's not a right approach. So it's a cloud service provider who got certain responsibility, customer got a responsibility. So while building the new application or building the new server, so the customer has to clearly look into that, where exactly the gap and start filling here. The third part is that the cloud eliminates IT teams. It's like current AI, right? The manpower get dropped, AI. So there's another factor that, because you need to run cloud effectively, you need a proper architect, you need to have a security architecture, you need to have a automation, which someone has to build the automation, someone has to do the cost optimization, FinOps all together. So you have Still the IT team, but doing some other function, they are available here. So these are the few points about that, the misconception about the cloud. And the last and foremost one, very critical, is cloud availability. Because I remember that way back when we started building a network, we take from two service providers, but now everyone take from one cloud provider. What happens if the cloud provider, their infrastructure is totally down? If you look into that current Iran US Israel war, you know, the UAE data center of AWS, it's almost come to an halt. So what about the availability? So the customer has to start thinking, I may have a proper availability in terms of alternate service provider. How I can build my architecture based on that? Maybe a mix of, the private and public cloud. So that's a way forward will help the customer.
Okay. So, as you were talking earlier about the scalability, so how do you align infrastructure strategies with business scalability and growth?
When we expand that, because always the cloud or infrastructure currently, one has to look as a long-term strategy. Though the application life cycles are shrinking at this point of time, more applications are coming, more dynamism happening here. So, but long-term strategy is very much required. Which direction I'm taking here? One is taking a public cloud that, so which are the region it's not available? For example, if I take one location in Africa where my business is expanding, if the public cloud is available in that location, if not, how I'm going to fill with the private cloud. So one has to look into the region and the other factor, as I mentioned, the availability. The very important factor is compliance and regulations. Compliance and regulation, not just keeping the infrastructure and data within the country. One has to look into how I'm going to manage. Because recently I remember one of the European bank, they're not allowing the SOC center to operate out of India. They want SOC center also to be there. If I have to take care of that, then I need to prepare for a SOC provider who is available end to end at Europe. So when I plan that strategy, I need to have an end to end infrastructure strategy of A to Z.
So, moving on to the next question, how do you integrate security layers like SASE and SIEM without increasing complexity?
Yeah. As I mentioned that, IT infrastructure is becoming a very complex. So, and I mentioned about the five pillars like traditional IT infrastructure, private cloud, public cloud, and, the SaaS application. So these are the access and the network is going to be SASE. SASE is one of the pillar. It's basically a security on cloud. It's not a cloud security, it's security on cloud. So when my application is scattered, not in a confined one like a traditional infrastructure, now it got expanded. I may take a SaaS provider who may be in Europe. I may take a AWS which may be in UAE region. I may have my data center available in Philippines. How I'm going to take care of this? So SaaS is that one built between that end user to the cloud or traditional infrastructure. How I'm going to have a security here? So this, during the COVID time, everyone started working agile. SASE started increasing at that point of time. So one has to plan the SASE, how in a complex scenario, how I'm going to simplify, as you rightly mentioned, that how to simplify. Things are becoming complex. We should not leave with the complex. Complex, again, how you bring a simplicity here, how you have an access path provider for your organization. Though, because one point of time, everyone say, oh, you can't have any access to internet, it's more vulnerable. But today you can't live 5 minutes without internet. Internet is required. So same scenario here. Now you have a complex situation, your application maybe across region, across location. So how you are going to manage secured way? So SASE is, comes very much into the picture. And we have uh, you know the provider, SASE provider. Mostly, I can name some of them like Fortinet or Cloudflare, Netscope. These are the organization. And now we have a Made in India also available. There's a company called Cost Grid. They started making SASE in India. And coming to the SAM part here, because when we have so many security components, because traditional one, you have only the firewall for the enterprise. You block the internet path, everything is blocked. But now your application is everywhere. How you are going to take care of the identity access management, key management, how you are going to have your firewall, web application filter, and container security, all the application security, all the security component here. Now, the amount of volume it generates, logs generate, it's huge. One can't sit with the traditional SAM and do the monitoring and alert that one. So there's a data lake built here. How from a data lake log, data lake with logs, how SAM can pick up from there, how AI can be built so that the events can be correlated a better way and provide a limited number of events to address. Assume that you have 100 events coming here, and maybe you need to focus only five here. So, where AI will help in terms of reducing the number of events here. How we are going to rely on AI, that's more important for the future. And that's what that, 2026 is more important for us. How we are going to build AI to handle the log of events.
Yes, definitely. AI is taking a lead in everything we do. So, moving on with the next question, what does observability mean in today's enterprise IT environment?
See, observability, again, that, enterprise observability, way back you look into that, the 2000, we have a HP, we have a computer associate, those kind of organizations. They were dominating. But it's very difficult to implement. You need a partner to implement. But when we have a manage engine kind of component, Zoho manage engine, it's very easy to deploy. There's a product called Sapphire, you know. So they are very easy to deploy and you can manage it. And they are more effective towards the enterprise management. Now you are moving across to the private cloud, public cloud. From monolithic, you move to the microservices. How you are going to do observability? If any user accesses a specific application, a container, which is slowing down, how you are going to capture here? So that's that, there's a company called, Dynatrace. They are the master here, or Datadog, these kind of organization. How the service provider of the observability are going to join with your journey in the cloud with you. That's more important here for them. So effectively, this makes us to take a trusted decisions and reducing complexity because the infrastructure is everywhere. But how you are going to virtually control everything together here and have a better user experience here. So that's what this new generation of observability tool, which is taking a lead at this point of time.
Okay. So that was really insightful from your end. So here's a quick rapid fire question that is, I would like you to answer. So we'll do quickly. Private cloud or public cloud? Which one you will pick?
One answer at this point of time because you are given a very tight, alternates here, but public cloud.
Public cloud. Scale or control? What will you choose?
Scale.
Scale. Moving on, cost optimization or performance?
I choose cost optimization. So one has to be
Security.
consciously conscious about the cost, as I
Cost.
mentioned it.
Oh, yes, yes. Cost is the main criteria that defines what strategy you're planning and how it will be executed, I believe. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, next question would be security layers or simplicity?
I say simplicity of security.
Okay. Observability, necessity, or overskill? Overkill. Sorry about that.
It's a necessity. One has to
Necessity.
take a decision using the observability and fastly diagnose where the fault is happening here, quickly get into the problem and resolve here.
Okay.
Yeah.
One word for infrastructure today. Today's infrastructure, what will be the one word that you will say?
So as I mentioned that, it's becoming complexity, how you do a complexity to simplicity, that's more important. One has to focus and take a right choice here. And, one should not assume that everything is available. We can go and buy it. They need to have a properly strategized plan so that you'll become more cost effective.
Right. So, very well said, Mr. Andrew. Thank you so much for such an insightful and valuable thoughts. Your experience is incredible. So, it was truly wonderful session that it was my pleasure hosting you today. For my viewers to get more such incredible insights from leading tech leaders, stay tuned with India IT 360. Do subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. You can also download our curated app for IT CXOs, IT360 Connect, where you can watch more such podcasts, share your views, articles, thoughts, and get first hand updates on our upcoming webinars, roundtables, and digital campaigns. You can join these directly using the app and earn points with every interaction, which can be easily earned through Amazon vouchers. We are also currently running the Tech Premier League TPL, where you can predict the winning team in ongoing IPL matches and win exciting rewards. Simply scan the QR code on the screen that is showing up and download to get started. That's all for today. Thank you once again, Mr. Andrew, for such a thoughtful session. And to all of viewers, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tech Tea Podcast by India IT 360. Do share your feedback in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, it is your host, Survi Sahay, signing off.